Hello, book lovers, and welcome to another episode of Authors Love Bookstores from a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Joe Moldover, and I am so happy to be with you this afternoon for episode number 136. For the last 3+ years, my partner, Kimberly Hensel Lawrence, and I have crisscrossed America visiting independent bookstores and hearing from the authors who love them. And this week, we could not be happier than to be in Acton, Massachusetts, with one of my personal favorites, indie bookstore, The Silver Unicorn, and independent bookseller, Paul Swiden. Paul, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Most weeks we only have one author with us, but summer is here. And this week we are doing a YA summer reading panel with three fabulous YA authors. And I am going to introduce them to our audience one at a time in alphabetical order for fairness. So first, I am so delighted to be here with Trisha Blanchet, publishing as TM Blanchet. Trisha is the author of Herrick's End and Herrick's Lie, books 1 and 2 of the Neath trilogy. Book 3, Herrick's Key, is scheduled for release in 2024. Trisha is a former reporter, magazine editor, award-winning humor columnist, and she founded the nonprofit organization Operation Delta Dog, service dogs for veterans. So she's extremely busy and makes me feel like a slacker. Trisha, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show. I wonder if you would give our audience a few words, in particular about your latest, about Herrick's Lie.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Hi, Jen. Hi, Kip. Hi, Paul. It's great. It's very exciting. My first one was Herrick's End, and that was book 1 of the trilogy. And in the book, a shy, lovable guy from the north end of Boston gets sucked into a dangerous, magical world below the city when he goes in search of a missing friend. And chaos ensues, of course. And then in book 2, the adventure continues when our hero is forced to discover what is under the surface of the big, scary green lake in the underground world. And he actually goes underwater in book 2. And it gets even weirder from there. And I have to say that I had a launch event last year for Herrick's End at the Silver Unicorn in Acton, and it was wonderful. The staff was so warm and welcoming. It happened to be right after lockdown. So people were just coming out, just starting to go back to social things, and everybody was nervous and what's going to happen. And the Silver Unicorn and Paul made it so wonderful and easy and relaxing. And I was there actually with Mr. Joe Moldover, who moderated that for me. And it will always have a special place in my heart because of that. So thank you, Paul, and the Silver Unicorn.
Fabulous. That was a great night. I love that. That was wonderful. Moving on to our next panelist, Jennifer DeLeon is the award-winning author of the YA novel Don't Ask Me Where I'm From, essay collection White Space, essays on culture, race, and writing. She's an active speaker, presenter, and educator. And her new novel, Borderless, was published in April 2023. Another fabulous launch event. Jan, and there it is. Jan, it's wonderful to see you. And I wonder, for those in the audience who don't know, tell us a little bit about Borderless.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so thrilled to be here and to see everyone. I also just am obsessed with the Silver Unicorn. And every time I go there, I can't help but leave with like a stack of books. And so I'm happy to be here with you, Paul, and also with TM Blanchet and Kip Wilson, TM, otherwise known as Trisha. And of course, Joe. So great. We didn't even plan on matching today. Borderless tells the story of 16-year-old Maya Silva, and she lives in Guatemala City with her mom. She loves life. She's got her best friend, her love interest. She attends a fashion school. The last thing on her mind is moving north to the United States. But one day she goes to visit her neighbor, and in the courtyard, she witnesses an act of violence that she cannot unsee. by a local gang member. And now the gang is after her and her mother, and they have to flee the country in the dead of night. So they make it to the US-Mexico border, and they hire a coyote to cross. But I won't tell you what happens next because I want you to read the book.
Yes, that's fabulous. Thank you, Jen. And Kip Wilson is the young adult author of White Rose, The Most Dazzling Girl in Berlin, and One Last Shot. I feel really well-rounded because I think I was at the launch events for all of those books.
Think
I think
you
I've been there
were.
for all of those. One Last Shot is the most recent, published in 2023. All of them historical novels in verse. When she's not writing novels in verse, Kip also is a translator, holding a PhD, I believe, in German studies. Is that correct, Kip?
German literature.
German literature, excuse me. Yes. So again, another one of the panelists making me feel lazy. If I would like, tell us a little bit about your work and especially about your latest One Last Shot.
Thank you so much, and thank you all of you too for all being here. And I love this connection to Silver Unicorn too. I also had my launch for One Last Shot there back in the cold of January, and I just have to say one thing. While I was there, I discovered afterwards next door. If you've never been to Silver Unicorn, first of all, go there and get your books, and then go next door. I have gotten pizza from New London Pizza for many years, but when I was there last time, my friend Carrie ordered these zucchini sticks, and they were so delicious. I had to go back last time, a couple weeks ago, I had to go back to get another book that I had ordered, and I had to go get those zucchini sticks again too. So now they're forever tied in my mind. But
amazing.
Sorry for the digression, but One Last Shot is, as you can see on the cover, we have this is a real person based on Gerda Taro, a photojournalist from the Spanish Civil War. She was born in Germany, ran away from Hitler and the Nazis to Paris, and then wound up fighting fascism again in Spain. Capturing her story in verse allowed me to also kind of capture moments like photographs. And so it really felt so natural for me talking about her this way and her story. And such a fabulous and interesting life that she had lived, though it was a short life, unfortunately. But I loved researching her and finding out. I wish she's one of those people I would love to sit down and have dinner with,
It's a fabulous book. Thank you for that introduction. So, Paul, you are the professional. Tell us a little bit about summer 2023. What are people talking about and reading in the YA world?
So first, everyone should be reading the new books from these three wonderful authors. And I can say that Borderless is currently our best-selling YA book of the year. So a lot of what's happening in YA right now is kind of older series picking up steam. And I think a lot of that is due to TikTok. So series like The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han, The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. These are the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman, which isn't old, but it's not brand new. These are series that we're seeing just get new life thanks to TikTok and are not flying out the door necessarily, but they're very, very steady sellers. Beyond that, there's a lot of really great YA, especially by local authors. One of my favorites this year is Spin by Rebecca Caprara. I knew Kip would have a copy of it. Kip was in conversation with Rebecca for the events that we did at our store. What else? Sunshine by Jarrett Krasoska is a new YA graphic novel that's been getting a lot of buzz and attention. And one that's near and dear to my heart is a book of short stories published by our local friends at Candlewick called Absolutely Normal. And it's all about short stories that smash mental health stereotypes. And it is near and dear to my heart because our high school's librarian, Anna Drury, has her debut short story in this book. But there's also stories by people everyone would know, like Nikki Grimes and National Book Award finalist Marcella Pixley, who's also a local teacher. And so it's just a really not only a good book, but an important book, I think, for teenagers to have, because we just don't talk enough about the various types of mental health things that teenagers go through.
Those are great recommendations. Thank you for those. And a reminder to the audience, not just people out there now, but also people watching this video in future time. Our show exists for one purpose, and that is to support independent booksellers. We are dropping links into the chat for you to pick up any of these books from Silver Unicorn. And of course, as Paul says, in particular, you should be picking up Trisha, Jen's, and Kip's books. So many questions I want to ask you guys. I don't know how we're going to get them all in, not least among them about this whole TikTok thing. But before we tackle that, one thing I love about this panel is that we have 3 YA authors that are coming from very different perspectives and very different genres, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Trisha, I want to come to you first because you are writing YA fantasy. And you are engaged in a massive project of world building. The Neath is this incredible alternate reality existing underneath Boston. It has its own sort of ecology. It has its own mythology. It has its own, in some cases, it has its own physics. Can you just say a little bit about say a little bit about writing fantasy for a YA author and about world building, about what brought you to that, and just tell us a little bit more.
I think I zeroed in on fantasy because it's very freeing and fun, because literally anything is possible. Any type of creature, any type of happening. Like you say, physics don't necessarily always apply. Dead things don't always stay dead. It's just remarkably freeing for my imagination just to be able to run. And as weird as it is, I've actually pulled out the most weird things. You'd never even see those, but what's left is still pretty weird. And I just enjoy it. I have a lot of fun. The time flies by when I'm writing. I don't even realize 5 hours has passed. So that's how I kind of know I'm enjoying it and I'm in the groove. Even as a kid, when I wrote stories, there was always like weird supernatural elements to it. But when I grew up, I said, okay, now I'm an adult. I have to write adult things. I have to leave all that behind. And I didn't have much success in publishing until I finally just said, you know what? I'm just going to write what I love, what I enjoy. Maybe someone else will love it too. Maybe they won't, but I have to be true to myself. And that's when I finally found an agent, found a publisher, and things sort of rolled together because I was just let my weird flag fly, as they say. And it just worked out that way.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful world. I mean, Paul, what's your take on the market? I mean, is YA fantasy just like always hot? Is it hot right now? I mean, what's your sense of sort of the YA fantasy market from the book selling point of view?
I think it hasn't slowed down any. I think it's more diverse now, which is great. We saw a lot with the Tracy Deon series, the newest one being Bloodmarked. So there's more perspectives out in the market now. And I if you want to look at from the publisher side, there's no like runaway freight train hit the way, like Divergent and Hunger Games were, 10, 15 years ago. But I think that's a good thing. I think that leads to people exploring more and finding something that's going to be right for them, and not just kind of walking over to the shelf and grabbing the new, you know, Suzanne Collins.
The new Hunger Games, yeah.
Yeah, but because they were nice enough to stop at 3 or 4 in Suzanne's because she did the prequel. But I think that's led to there being more discovery of new authors, and I think that's a good thing.
Jen, you are coming from a different perspective in your work, and my first YA novel was about the aftermath of a school shooting, and I think a lot of the discussion when I brought that book out was about how do you write about difficult or traumatic topics for a young audience. You are writing contemporary realistic YA. Some of the events in your books are very difficult. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, about sort of the topics that you take on and about writing about them for a young audience?
Definitely. I'll say that in general, I'm really gravitate towards stories where characters and people who've traditionally been in the margins, like I try to bring them to the center. So I try to look at scenarios in history or contemporary, society, and see, whose stories are being left out a lot of the times. And for me, I wasn't seeing much work around contemporary teenagers in Guatemala, in Central America, who were faced with this grueling decision of having to leave their home and come to the United States and seek a quote unquote better life. And Toni Morrison's famous quote is always ringing in my ears, right? Like, if there's a book in the world that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you need to be the one to write it. So that's how I kind of give myself prompts, for better or for worse. And fun fact for those of you listening, Trisha and Joe were in a writing workshop with me, with the amazing Jenna Blum, co-founder of The Mighty Blaze. And you were the first ones to see pages from Borderless. It was previously called Maya, but it's really cool that, we were in that workshop together right before the pandemic, and we were meeting in person, and then March 2020 happened, and I kept working on the book, and now it's in the world. It's wild. But I was really drawn to writing a counter narrative to what I was seeing in the news, that people from Central America, that migrants are just bringing crime and rape and drugs. And it's like, no, that's not every single one. So I just tried to drill down on one single story, in this case of a 16-year-old girl named Maya.
Mark, our friend Mark Cecil, recalls the workshop. I remember reading those pages, Jen, and they were crackling from the beginning. It is like not at all surprising that 4 years later, this is the best-selling book, best-selling YA Silver Unicorn. Paul, I recently did an afternoon with the New England Independent Booksellers Association on the topic of selling. Carrying and selling, YA books on difficult topics. That was sort of the topic for the afternoon, and and I heard a lot from the booksellers there about some of the challenges for them. Some of them kind of more psychological in terms of carrying books that might be challenging or upsetting or traumatizing for younger readers. Also, in some cases, political in terms of carrying books that might be, in some sense, controversial or even inflammatory in their communities. These were booksellers from a lot of different communities around New England, some of them, more politically conservative than others. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of being a bookseller and of taking on hot current topics or books that are dealing with difficult topics for young readers?
Yeah, I think there's always a delicate balance to it. And we've certainly had issues in our community, with in a few years back with teen suicide, and there were books and movies that the school administration advised parents to steer clear from, because they were triggering, and you have to respect that. I do think it's important to represent those kinds of books on our shelves, and you know, there's always more than one way to sell a book, right? So while a book like Borderless, um, and you know, Kip's books deal with heavy topics, you know, Kip's second book, the I'm blanking on the title, but with Berlin in the title.
Most dazzling girl in
Um,
Berlin.
yeah, you know, I'm it's right in line with books that are being banned all across the country. You know, 4 years ago when Jen started working on Borderless, it, you know, was a big national conversation, and you know, I'm sure that it's going to become part of the national conversation again as we get into you know, presidential election season. So it's important to have these books on the shelves, but it's also important. What we try to keep in mind is we don't want to seem overzealous in recommending that kids read hard books, or if we, you know, if we feel strongly about a particular book like we do with Kips and Jen's, you know, we try to balance it out with maybe some lighter recommendations so that we don't seem like we're trying to be heavy-handed. Um, but you know, at the same time, recognizing that teenagers are ready for a lot more than we think they're ready for, and you know, I see that every day at my store. You know, where we have teenage booksellers who, you know, run the store every afternoon. Essentially, you know, I go home, my GM Megan goes home, and the store is left in the care of teenagers every single day. And you know, when I say that to other booksellers, they, you know, sometimes they kind of, you know, they kind of turn their head at me and they're like, "What?" um, and so, you know, it's a valuable thing to be reminded of on a daily basis that teenagers are ready for more than we think they are.
Paul, sort of follow-up question about that, which, you know, again, is something that comes out of that panel I did, which is about whether you feel pressure to be or not to be topical as a bookseller. You know, I mean, we were just reminiscing about when we did the Trisha's launch last year in May of 2022. I mean, that day coincided with the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas. It was the same day, and I think one of the questions, one of the challenges is, you know, how do we talk about these things? Do we acknowledge these things? Is it too soon to talk about these things? I think the booksellers on the panel I did were also wrestling with that. You know, when there are events in the world, should booksellers immediately be commenting, putting out tables of books on that particular topic,
Right.
you know, participating in that conversation, or is that not appropriate? I mean, do you have feelings about that?
Yeah, I mean, so our store is a little more limited in what we can make little tables of, because we just don't have a ton of space to do that in, and a lot of our display space is for new titles. I do feel more of a pull to do that on the adult side for sure. You know, unfortunately, Cormac McCarthy passed away yesterday, and the second I saw that, I was I was in my inventory system ordering Cormac McCarthy books, because I know that people are going to come in this weekend wanting them. As you know, as the news spreads that, you know, perhaps our greatest living novelist just passed away. Um, you know, certainly during presidential election cycles, and times when everyone is paying attention to a specific topic, we've made those, whether they're website lists or you know, displays in the store. But it's, you know, having the limited space kind of um, is clarifying for us, because we really don't make a display out of something unless it's something that we're confident that everybody is paying attention to. You know, I think in our sort of social media ecosystem, you know, there's every day there's like a topic du jour, and when you're on social media and you're really dialed into it, you can feel like everyone's paying attention to this, and then you talk to other people and they're like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So we, when we're going to make a big deal out of something, we make sure that it passes the smell test, for lack of a better word, that everyone's paying attention to this.
Yeah, social media is a topic we want to come back to, but first, I want to hear a little bit more from Kip Wilson. So Kip, you are among our panelists. You are here as both our historical novelist, writing historical fiction, and also as writing novels in verse. Our friend Mark Cecil comments that he feels like he's heard both Jen and Trisha talk before on different panels about breaking free from expectations and just writing what you want. I feel, Kip, like from going to a lot of your events before, that may be something that's also applicable to you. Will you tell us a little bit about writing in verse in your journey?
Yeah, I think, well, both, it's funny because they're both so different, both verse and historical, because I think historical is typically, it's one of those things that, fantasy gets very big, or, paranormal has these waves of, the vampire books or whatever, but historical is just kind of always there, this little blip at the bottom of your screen. And it's never goes away, but it never like, whoa. And, but verse is kind of one of those things that does, like, I think there has been a lot of interest in that, because kids, just like with graphic novels, kids and teenagers like reading in verse because it's something they can, get through fairly quickly and really connect with. So it's, I don't know, I feel lucky for me that, writing historical is kind of balanced for me with writing in verse, because it makes it a bit more accessible. I think if it were straight historical, I'm not sure how many non-adults are like that passionate about it, right? But I think a lot of teens are passionate about verse.
You once told me, or you once said it in one of the presentations that I've been to that you've done. I think you mentioned sort of like how many books you had written before White Rose. Will you remind me?
Yeah, like 10.
10.
Yeah, a lot.
And were those all novels in verse, Kip, or no?
No.
Yeah,
So let's see. Yeah, I wrote all those books were in prose, and I was just it was so hard for me to write in prose. I had studied, poetry, German literature, and specifically the poetry of Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke, and I loved poetry as a reader. But I was trying to write in prose. I don't know what I was thinking. And it was so hard for me. And then finally, when I had been talking to this other verse novelist, interviewing them for this journal, and they're like, oh yeah, well, verse, does lend itself well to like these kind of tragic, heavy subjects, and also historical subjects. And oh, okay. And then that's when I started writing White Rose that way. And for me, that was, then like light bulb. Oh, why didn't I think of this before? I could have saved myself several years.
I mean, one thing and I think one thing that has like strikes me about all of your books is that you sort of have this ability to identify these historical figures, all of them strong women, all of them sort of standing up to tyranny in various ways. Which I think is very topical for our moment. I mean, you just sort of seem to have this unbelievable eye for these previously unappreciated or underappreciated figures. I mean, Kip, where do you find your protagonists? Like, I mean, where do you find these people?
Well, like White Rose is Sophie Scholl is someone I first got to know during high school. In my high school German class, I found out about her, and I read everything I could about her for like 20 years. So it's just I never got her out of my head, and Gerda Taro, I had discovered through the Google Doodle. Like, I had never heard of her, but I was trying to find a way to bring the Spanish Civil War to life for Americans that was not from the perspective of a Spaniard, because I am not a Spaniard. I am married to one, but it's I go there often, but it's not, Spaniards do not like to talk about the Spanish Civil War. And even my whole in-law family, it's not really a topic that people talk about. It's starting to a bit more now. There are now some laws in place to, they're doing a lot more archaeology on battlefields and sites that, I mean, it's yeah, it's a very heavy topic. So I knew I couldn't write about from a Spanish perspective because that's something that I don't have. So Gerda, for me, from the German side, which is where she was from, was I just fell in love with her, just like I fell in love with Sophie Scholl. So you find out about somebody and for historical, and when they're, just like when I think when you're writing in contemporary or in fantasy or anything else, once you get so passionate about your character, that's when you're just like, okay, I have them. I have to just figure everything out about them. And
yeah, I mean, they're unbelievable figures. Paul, what's your take on the sort of novels in verse? Kip sort of is saying that there's a receptive audience for this in young adult readers, that there may not be in adults. What's your sense of sort of presenting these books to young adults? And also, I mean, is this a gateway drug to poetry for young people that you guys can push?
I don't know about it being a gateway drug to poetry because I've read several novels in verse and haven't felt compelled to go read more poetry myself. That doesn't mean.
But you're not a young adult, Paul.
I'm not a young adult. Fair. I will say my favorite thing about novels in verse is that they're great for reluctant readers. So, someone that looks at a 400-page book that's all words, it's not a graphic novel, and, sometimes it can be intimidating. The most popular books that we have for kids now are either graphic novels or heavily illustrated novels, like Last Kids on Earth and Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Dork Diaries. So pushing into books that are just words as those kids are maturing into young adults, this can be another step along the path. And I've seen that with my own son. He really dug in last year on Rebecca Caprara's Worst Case Colin, and there's been some other novels in verse that are just, whether it's Jason Reynolds or Kip's books. I think there's something to be said for having them, again, well represented on your shelf, because they really do help with kids that are reluctant to read a full book. Having said that, they're also full and beautiful books, and we, just as YA is kind of its own bookstore within a bookstore. Within YA, you get romance and fantasy and sci-fi. And middle grade is similar, but YA much more so. And historical fiction and novels in verse. So, you want to have all of that on our YA shelves, so that readers are able to discover, every different type of book.
Yeah, absolutely. That is great. We cannot have a YA crew together without talking a little bit about social media. And so this is a little bit of a jump ball for the panel. I mean, Paul mentioned TikTok before, and the influence that TikTok has on books that are previously out of print. Can people talk a little bit about social media and TikTok and the role that it plays in your writing?
Well, I am on TikTok. I might be the only one of the three of us. I don't know. My publisher begged me to get on last year because that's when everything was blowing up about if you write YA, you have to be on TikTok. So I did go on. I was pretty regular, like maybe 5 times a week. I would post things. I would spend many, many hours looking at other people's book talks and commenting. And I'm sort of worn out by it, to be honest. I have lots of followers, which is great. I don't know that it translates to book sales. It's hard to say exactly, but it's like another full-time job because you don't just get on Book Talk. You make reels and videos, and they're interactive and they're entertaining, and it's like being a film director. It's a lot of work. And my sense is that there's a handful of authors who are really benefiting from it, and the majority probably aren't in terms of sales. But that's just
Trisha, your videos are like off the charts fantastic, by the way. I mean, like you're doing like Hollywood quality work. No, you are. And like we've put the link to follow you on TikTok in the chat. So people should like check that out, especially if you're out there and you're a YA author and you want to see what pro looks like. I mean, that is just great stuff. Jen, what is your like engagement with social media? I mean, I know that you have I mean, you at this point, I mean, you have a considerable following among YA readers, and you know, I mean, when I went to your launch for Borderless, it was like so moving, the degree to which students and readers are engaged with your work and are touched by your work. Do you engage with your readers over social media? Is that something that you enjoy? Is that something that you try to avoid? I mean, how do you relate to it?
Oh my goodness. I will be so honest with you and tell you that I am not a phone person. If it were up to me, I'd have a flip phone or something right now. I'm just like, and people know, like if my sisters are watching, they can confirm that I don't even reply to their texts. And if someone's trying to reach me, they literally call my husband because I don't even know where my phone is half the time. So the idea of like going on TikTok, it just is like so overwhelming to me. But connecting with teens, I don't know, I guess I'm old school. You know, I've been a teacher forever and I love kids and I love young people. And when I do school visits, it's funny to me that I'm like, yeah, okay, it was great to meet you. Follow me. And then after the event, I see like all these like, you know, the blue, like follow. And then I'm like, oh God, now I better post something. You know, I'm like, I sell the car and then I'm like, I don't even have a license. You know, it's that kind of a thing. So I'm much more of an in-person person. And I do what I can on social media to stay afloat. But my preference is IRL, in real life, which I learned that's what it means.
Yeah, no, I mean, years ago, I asked my agent whether I should be on Twitter more, and he was kind of like, well, look, like if you can do that, like if you kind of can capture that voice, and if that's fun for you, and if you can do that well, go for it. But if that's not your thing, then don't force it because it's not like it's not going to fly if it's not natural. Kip, we were recently, ironically, in person, talking about this. We got to have lunch together, and we were talking a little bit about sort of social media. Tell us about your engagement and what role it plays with your work.
Yeah, I guess I must be somewhere in between, probably closer to Jen's end of the spectrum as well. I do have my phone next to me though, but like, but other than that, I really do miss Twitter as it was like 10 years ago. You know, it was slowly getting terrible, and then now it's just so awful I rarely go there. And that was my favorite because it was like a more of a conversation with like other writers, and you know, with also, you know, eventually once I got published too, this is way before I was even published, I met some critique partners on there, and you know, started going to festivals or conferences to see other people that I had met there, or things like that. And then finally meeting educators and librarians and everything, booksellers too, through Twitter. So that was nice. And then it was very not nice for many people. And then now it's just, I don't know, a dumpster fire, or not even. It's just a like smoldering pile of waste.
I mean, at times it feels dangerous. Like at times it feels like,
Yeah.
you're going to post the wrong thing, or you're going to say the wrong thing, or comment on the wrong whatever, and you're just going to it's going to like blow up in your face. So, I mean, I think there is kind of this cost benefit analysis where it feels like there's a real downside to it, to be honest.
Yeah, right. And that's, I am on Instagram, where it is more of a nicer, like just like, oh, here are these pretty pictures, these are these lovely books, or this is my flower garden, or whatever. But it's not quite the same conversation sort of aspect that there was on Twitter. And I am on TikTok, but I'm just not a regular. And again, with my little historical verse niche, I'm like over here with my 20 followers and my 20 people I follow, and that's But every once in a while, I will like recommend some books or something. But I am hoping, so I'm switching next year. From this year, I've been working in an elementary school library, which I have loved, but I'll be moving to high school next year. So I think that'll be really awesome for working with YA books, because I love them so much. So
Absolutely. We have come to the moment in the show where we need to do some heavy lifting in terms of selling some books. And so I am going to be asking you all for your recommendations in terms of what you're excited about right now, what you might have read recently, what might be coming out this summer that you're really amped about. For the audience, we are going to be dropping links to pick up these books from only one place, the Silver Unicorn, in the chat. So click those links and pick up what you can. We'll go back to alphabetical. Trisha, tell us what you are excited about.
Well, right now I'm reading two things at the same time, which I often do because I have audiobooks and then regular books. So I always have two things going. For audio, I took a chance on a zombie thriller called Rise Again by Ben Tripp, and I'm loving it. It's very high action, which is what I love. And it's like watching The Walking Dead, but in book form with different characters. It's really good. I know that's not for everybody, but the other thing I'm reading is for everybody, probably History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. Incredibly strange and wonderful and weird, about a group of people who have been isolated in the woods for a very long time because they believe that if they leave their little sheltered place, they'll die from a terrible disease in the outside world. And you're trying to figure out if this is true or not true or what's going on. And it's really interesting. Next on my TBR is Anne Garvin's new book is coming out in August, called There's No Coming Back from This. And her books are always just really funny and light and fun. They usually involve road trips and girlfriends and zany capers. And I always love her books. So I'm going to be sure to get that one in August. And then I've been hearing some buzz about a book called The Puzzle Master by Danielle Trussoni, I think it is. And it just sounds fascinating. Sounds right up my alley. My novels always include puzzle solving of some kind. So I think this book has a lot of that in it, The Puzzle Master. So
yeah, we've had Danielle Trussoni on the show, and she's fabulous. We'll drop a link to the interview with her in the chat. Those are wonderful recommendations. Thank you for sharing those. Jen, what are you excited about? What do you want to recommend?
Yes, Danielle Trussoni, I just want to echo, she's lovely. And like 1,000 years ago, I gave her a ride to Breadloaf to the conference. So I don't know if she remembers me, but I am really excited because this spring I was able to go to a book event, that's Silver Unicorn, but now I'm going to have time to actually read the books that I got. So one of them is Mirror to Mirror by Rajani LaRocca, and I went to her launch for this event. It was incredible. She had cookies with the cover, and I still don't know how people do that, but I want to do that someday. Anyway, it's a novel in verse, and Rajani is incredible. And I'm also reading historical YA.
So good.
So good. I know, right? I started reading it, and I'm just like, I can't. So it's like poetry and prose.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you want to just like sink into each paragraph. And then I'm so pumped about Autumn Allen. This comes out in August. This is her debut YA novel, and it's from the perspective of two Black teenagers, one in 1968 and one in 1995. So it's back and forth, all you have to do. And Autumn's amazing. She's a local author too. And I'll be in conversation with her for her launch. I don't know where, but we'll be somewhere. And I'm really excited about those books.
Those are fabulous. Kip, what do you want to share?
Okay, so I've got two that have come out earlier this year, and then two that, well, one that came out yesterday also, and then one that's coming out very soon. So let's see. First one out this year, We Are Also Good at Smiling by Amber McBride, also a novel in verse. I love Amber's work so much, and look at just this beautiful cover. Oh my goodness. And this deals with also mental health issues, like that anthology Paul mentioned. And it's just such a beautiful book. I would read anything Amber writes. She is a true poet. Like, I kind of stumbled into poetry from being a reader of poetry, but I love her work so much. And this one I kind of held up earlier. This is my copy of Spin, which I absolutely love. This is Rebecca Caprara's retelling of the Arachne myth, and it's in verse, and it's young adult, and it is fabulous. And then let's see here, one more. I actually didn't plan it this way, but all four of my recommendations are in verse. This came out yesterday by Amelia Brunskill. It's called Wolfpack. This is a novel in verse about these girls in a cult, and it's from all of their different perspectives, and they are a wolf pack, and it is a thriller. It is so I blurbed it. I couldn't put it down. What did I say? Wolfpack held me breathless as I raced through the pages, utterly captivated by the teen girls at the story's core. So there you have that one. And then one last one. This one, I have this copy already, but I think it's out very soon. It's called Ode to My First Car by Robin Gao. And A Million Quiet Revolutions was their first book that came. I feel like it did come out just last year. And I just love their work. It's beautiful poetry. And I am a fan of teenagers and first cars also. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, title alone, I'm like, gimme. So.
Oh my gosh, all great recommendations. Paul, this is terrible for you because they've taken up all the good books, but you are the seasoned professional, so I'm confident that you can still give us a couple of good recommendations.
Okay, I'll give you 4 that are out and 4 that are coming out.
All right.
So 4 of my favorite books of the year that are out: Drowning by T.J. Newman. In the first 5 pages, a plane that takes off from Hawaii sinks into the ocean, and that is just the start. So, trigger warning if you're, afraid of planes, but fantastic book. Her last book, Falling, was amazing as well. Waco by Jeff Gwynne was a really great look at the incident in Waco, which is celebrating is not the right word, having its 30th anniversary this year. And it deals with, in the aftermath of Waco, how it led to a lot of the far-right nationalism we're seeing in the country right now. Hoops by Matt Tavares is a really great middle grade graphic novel about it's a fictional account of a real basketball team, a girls basketball team from the 70s, and it's just a really great story of perseverance and of these girls coming together. And then our now all-time best-selling book is called A Work in Progress by local author Jarrett Lerner. And this is a heavily illustrated middle grade novel. Again, going back to our conversation about difficult topics, it deals with body image and, a boy who feels like he's just too big and needs to get thinner and kind of the trials and tribulations he goes through on his journey to acceptance. For books that are coming out, next month we get Crook Manifesto by Colson Whitehead, which is just an awesome just crime novel set in Harlem in the 70s. The first one in the series was called Harlem Shuffle and was set in the 60s. So it's like 10 years later, you pick up with the same two main characters, and just, every sentence that Colson Whitehead writes is just beautiful. Then there are 3 YA books that I'm going to plug because we're having events for all 3. So we have One of Us is Back by Karen M. McManus. This is the conclusion of her trilogy that started with One of Us is Lying. We'll be hosting Karen on September 19th. We have Maggie Takuta Hall's new book that is coming in the fall, which is, I'm already blanking on the title. Hold on, give me a second. It is The Siren, the Song, and the Spy. Maggie, you may know because she garnered a lot of press a month or so ago because Scholastic was trying to censor one of her picture books called Love in the Library. So we're hopeful that people keep paying attention to Maggie's work. And this book is the second in a series that started a couple years back with Candlewick. We'll be hosting Maggie virtually during her launch week on September 26th. Unfortunately, she lives all the way in California, so we can't get her out here in person, but we're very excited. And then the last one is a nonfiction and told, mainly through verse. It's a biography in verse called A Long Time Coming by Ray Anthony Shepard. And Ray is really, really awesome guy who lives locally, and we're going to be hosting him. It's a YA biography in verse of 6 important Black Americans: Ona Judge, who he's written a picture book about, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Martin Luther King Jr., and Barack Obama. And it's going to be a really unique book in the YA space, and we're hosting him for that on September 12th. So we don't have it all up on the website yet, but definitely check us out when the time comes.
Unbelievable recommendations. I mean, to the audience, if among all of those recommendations from these 4 people you can't find something you want, I don't know how to help you. So hit the links and pick up some copies from the Silver Unicorn. We are running down on time, but I want to, Paul, before we go, ask you the question that we always ask at the end of our shows of the independent bookseller with us, which is this: success as an independent bookseller is part luck, part hard work, and part what else?
Okay, so I'm going to say positive energy.
Nice.
A lot of times you have no idea if something is going to work, if an event is going to be successful, if a book you ordered a lot of will sell, if a sideline that you bring into the store is going to do well. But all you can do is try to put good in the world, and we do that as often as we can. We host regularly a bin for our local food pantry. We try to donate or sponsor as many events around town and our community as we can. We've built little free libraries, and it's all just with community in mind. I say we're founded on the principle of 3 C's: curation, convenience, and community. And the curation and the convenience kind of take care of itself, in terms of what we're ordering and that we have a physical storefront. But community is something that you have to work at, and the only way to work at it is to be positive about it. We're very blessed to have a great state here in Massachusetts, and a welcoming community of readers and people in general. And so we've found that the best way to successful is just to put good out in the world, and whether it might not be a direct ROI to that, but good will come back eventually.
That's fabulous. I love that. And I've been to Silver Unicorn many, many times, and I think all of the panelists will agree with me that it is absolutely full of positive energy. So thank you for that. Thank you to all of you for being here with me today. This has been a complete pleasure. Trisha Blanchet, publishing is TM Blanchet, Jennifer DeLeon, Kip Wilson, fabulous YA authors. Thank you so much for being here. Paul Swiden from the Silver Unicorn. To our audience, thank you for joining us. A couple of quick heads up. We are back next week. We're going to Alaska for the third time. We're going to be with Stephanie Thornton at the Writer's Block in Anchorage, so don't miss that. And we are only episodes away from our trip to Greedy Reads in Baltimore, Maryland. Why am I excited about that? Because that will be our 50th out of 50 states. That will represent our having hit 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico, to say nothing of the UK and Canada. So keep your eye out for that. That's coming up in July. Finally checking off the last state on the map. Maryland, I don't know what their issue has been, but we finally got them. Thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here today for YA Summer Reading. It's been a complete delight to talk to all of you. Thank you to the audience. Have a fabulous summer. Happy reading. Be well and keep reading.